All right, we are live. Hello, everybody. Sorry we're a bit late. Welcome to Winging It, a show by Oddbird about web development, design, and our approach to solving problems. Today we'll be talking with Roma Komarov about new CSS features like mixins and functions and so much more. I'm Stacy Kvernmo here with my co-host Miriam Suzanne. And Roma, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Roman or Roma, work in Datadog. I'm a member of CSS Working Group. Not yet an editor of any specifications, although maybe in the future. But yeah, in general, I like to experiment on CSS, do some, I guess, wild things, trying to go beyond what is possible, beyond the box on the margins, I guess. So yeah.
I was checking your site out, and I really, really appreciate, one, the typography is gorgeous, and two, the way you explain some of the snippets of code. Like, you have so many comments about what like each thing does. And I tried to do that, but I'm not as meticulous as all your snippets were in all the blog posts I was reading. So just wanted to let you know, if you haven't heard that before, it is appreciated, and keep up the good work.
Yeah, thank you.
That sounds like a good sign that you should be a spec editor. I wonder.
Yeah, I guess it will be just need to get into the groove, properly learn the format that we need to do this, because it's not Markdown, but the bike shed thing. Maybe I need to write my own converter from Markdown to bike shed. I don't know.
There's a few surprises in there, like tabs and spaces are both used in a bike shed spec. They're used differently. So
excellent. Okay, so thanks everybody else for joining us today. If you have questions and you're watching live, you can certainly leave a comment in the live chat. And if you're watching afterwards, go ahead and feel free to leave a comment. We'll try to address them as we see them rolling in. So let's get started. Just off the bat, let's start with the basics. What is a CSS Mixin? Miriam, I'm going to throw that one to you first.
Yeah, I like that as the basics. They don't exist yet. There was a flag in Chrome to play with a prototype of them, but I loaded that up this morning and it didn't work. So that must have been removed. I know they are planning to implement, so but I think they have to, like, those experimental flags, they have to maintain from one version to the next only if they're important enough. So we'll see when that comes back. A mixin, to answer the question, a mixin is a chunk of code that we can sort of pull out from any particular selector and then mix into that selector. So it exists at the level of multiple declarations or declaration blocks, like a selector. Basically anything that we could put inside of a selector, including nested selectors, nested conditions, whether that's media queries or container queries or some other sort of condition. We can put all of that into a mixin, and then we can say, apply that mixin to this selector, and it will treat it basically like it's just nested code. So we're basically building on top of CSS nesting and letting you abstract parts away and then reuse them in different places. So you can write it once and use it multiple different places.
And how does that differ from a Sass mixin?
The main difference is that Sass mixins are imperative and CSS mixins are declarative. Sass mixins can call themselves, so you can end up with recursion and loops and things like that. And that's not going to be possible in CSS. I think CSS mixins aren't going to give us a lot of new functionality. They're mostly going to give us ease of writing.
There will be some new things that they will allow us to do.
Like what?
Please, yes. Please go on.
I guess like new to CSS in some way, but the way it will store the, I guess, environmental, like custom environmental variables is slightly I guess, new to CSS, given that we will be able to pass any dynamic arguments and do all the stuff with that. It kind of will allow, similar to functions, to define like some local variables that make sense only inside the mixin. And then I guess like in Sass you could do the same, because you could have Sass variables and then compile them. But of course with CSS it will be much more dynamic. You will be able to do many things. And I think I have a proposal that will make them even more dynamic, where with mixins, there will be two things that you can do. Like one is just call mixin, maybe optionally pass some parameters inside, and then it will output some declarations or rules and declarations. But then there is also an optional parameter with the block content. So you could pass some contents inside the mixin. So you call it with some declarations or rules and so on. And you will be able to wrap this content with anything. You could add any meta queries, container queries, anything. But then, like my proposal, I have an issue about this, where right now you can define environmental variables inside the mixin, but they're only available inside the mixin. And my proposal is to make them also available inside this block that you are passing, which kind of allows you to, will allow it, if it will be accepted, isolate some of the gen tokens or anything inside the mixin, call it somewhere, pass content, and this content will be able to access these environmental variables. So it's kind of a way to scope some of your values without them affecting anything else and easily access them. And like this could allow a few interesting use cases.
Yeah, that's interesting. The demo that I had pulled up to show with mixins was a mixin that just defines a lot of different easing functions, sort of mixing in those custom properties only when you need them instead of defining them globally. So I can actually post a link to that demo in the chat, but it won't work for you, but you can see the concept of it. The mixin just defines a lot of different custom properties, and then you could mix those in and then reference them only where you need them. You're talking about doing that same thing, but passing it to the contents block. So that's like using a mixin as a wrapper. So you could sort of do custom media queries that way. You have a mixin called small screen, and inside of that mixin, you define your small screen media query. And inside of that, you call the @contents. And then when you use the mixin, you pass in what you want to apply at that media query. And yeah, your proposal would allow you to pass special values into that block.
Yeah, I guess my proposal, so in your code pen, I think if I can maybe see if I could share the screen, just so I could kind of pseudocode what I'm talking about. Present. Okay, so let me zoom it a lot. So yeah, so this is the syntax that was necessary for the old Mixins implementation. In the future, we will not need this because you could just
the
do
extra wrapping.
Oh, actually, I think, does it work for me?
It did something.
Oh, did it?
No, I think it's. Yeah, I don't know why it did something, but yeah, it should not. But okay. So in this case, let's say we have this mixin, which you call just easing. What it does, it adds all these custom properties to the element where you're calling it with. So, for example, if you had already somewhere defined in a different library these custom properties, inside this element, they will be overridden by whatever we are applying through this mixin. The idea is that we will be able to, I don't actually remember the syntax. I think it will be something like this, maybe, like at env, and then you define an environmental variable, which is only accessible inside the scope. Maybe the syntax differs, but the idea is that, we will be able to define things like that. And then when you want to use it, for example, let's find something. I don't know if we actually use it anywhere. Yeah, maybe here. So it will be apply easing, but then you can pass. I don't know if you need to always do it this way with the new spec. But the idea is that you will be able to pass any block of properties here. And then instead of doing it like this, you could do it like this. And then this environmental variable will kind of fall down from this mixin to this block and will not be available anywhere else. So you are able to define some scope with some custom properties or environmental custom environmental variables, and then use them for this block only. So this kind of allows you to isolate them, don't pollute the whole scope, don't override anything, and only use what you need from this mixin. But of course, you could also output some other custom properties or whatever. Yeah.
I could imagine that being useful for light dark scheming, things like that, pulling in different color themes at different places and then applying those color schemes.
Yeah, let me see if I could find my issue about this.
In the meantime, while you're looking, we were talking before we went live about where you can use this, and right now it's not really easily available, if at all. There was a command line you could have run. I don't know if anyone knows what happened, if there is a way to run this yourself before it's fully implemented. Do we know what sort of timeline this will be?
We don't know when this will become available. I expect that functions are going to become available first. And I saw in the chat somebody saying they expected mixins to come first. I did too. When I was writing these proposals, I thought mixins were going to be what we get first. But it seems like functions are actually simpler for browsers to implement and also provide more new functionality. There was some sense from browser engineers that maybe we didn't need mixins at all. And I think we've gotten them to come around on that and convince them that mixins are useful. But if you have use cases for mixins, tell your local browser engineers. I think that still needs some convincing. But
yeah, I think Google developers and Chrome engineers asked a lot about this at last CSS Day conference. They queried people a lot. What do you want from mixins? What do you think they could provide that Sass mixin doesn't? Or even if they do the same, do we still need them? And I think there was a lot of feedback that, yeah, we need this, including from me. And yeah, I think I proposed this as well. So this is like one other similar case that we could try to do with this type of mixins that I propose, where you can have like mixin that provides some nice hover. By default, it will output like hover, focus visible on this element, and add the color property with some value. But then it will also provide this, I guess, token for this color that is used inside. So you could instead add any other custom properties and use this value as well. So so you pass these declarations, and they will be applied here. This is default value. Like, I guess if you are not passing inside any contents, like here, it will just use color with this value. If you pass anything inside, it will apply these two declarations. This is like already what is defined in the spec. So my addition is that just expose this environmental variable in these two places. So you can have like some built-in value into the mixin, and then you could use it alongside any other things that you are passing inside. So this kind of allows you to work pretty flexible APIs for your mixins. And I guess like there is a lot of possibilities that this unlocks.
Yeah, that's fun. And deep pink is the nicest pink. So that's
Yes.
a good demo.
Yeah, I learned it on this last CSS Day.
I don't know if that's an inside joke, but I do like salmon too. That's a pretty good
Oh,
named color.
salmon is good.
Yeah.
Yeah, in my talk, I debated hot pink versus deep pink and argued for
Mm.
deep pink. So that was the inside joke bit.
Yeah, between the two, I agree. Definitely agree.
Deep pink, I think, is one of the colors with the highest saturation of any named color. But
That's
that
a
is
fun
not the
fact.
topic.
We could do that on CSS's awesome game show next.
Well, now we've given it away.
Mm,
Now everyone
that's too
knows.
bad. Well, if you've done your homework and watched, then you'll have at least one up. All right, you want to like go over to functions, since we might be able to like show a little bit more about how functions work today.
Sure.
Same question. What is a CSS function this time, Roma? I'll pass it right to you.
Yeah, so functions in CSS is similar to mixins, but it only applies inside the value of some property. I guess there is like a very hidden difference where functions are evaluated later. So when you define a function, it will be run on this element. I think like at computed time, maybe it used. I don't remember the exact timing, but quite late. While mixins are defined to kind of just substitute their contents with what's inside. And this maybe for mixins could introduce some challenges in a way. How do we expose the values that like environmental variables and stuff like that in the CSS OM? We'll see how it will be resolved when implementers will start doing something with it. But functions just run when you define them. They're already available in latest Chrome, from what I remember. And yeah, they allow you to, I guess, isolate some calculations inside the function and then reuse it along different properties. And there are like a few very neat things that they allow you to do. For example, you can type them. There are type definitions for arguments and for return value. So I think, as someone recently wrote in Mastodon, CSS got types sooner than JavaScript. So yeah.
Yeah, one of the interesting differences between, I mean, in some ways, a function is just a powerful custom property that can take arguments, a custom property you can pass arguments into. The other big difference there is like right now, if you define a custom property on root that relies on another custom property in a, say, in a calculation or something. So you've got like a double gap property and it relies on the gap property and then it doubles it. That will happen before the value inherits. So that will happen en route with whatever value of gap exists en route. And then you'll get that doubling and then it will inherit the final result of the calculation. Functions are different from that, where if you did the same thing using a custom function en route, you would inherit the function. And if the value of gap changed somewhere else in your code, the value of double gap would also change. That relationship remains. So that's one of the, I don't know, I think interesting and powerful and maybe somewhat hidden in that people don't always think about how that inheritance works with custom properties right now and how that would be different. But I'm looking forward to that. Maintaining relationships.
Yeah, I love that, those little like unique things that make them different and how you expose those. I have a question here from Owl. What do you think of the @sheet proposal? Is that a thing?
It is a thing.
Yes.
Oh,
It is. I guess I don't know all the details. I did not look into it too much, but from what I understand, it is there to allow you to define different, I guess, chunks of code in the same style sheet, which are not applied by default. But then you could then apply them programmatically, so through JavaScript. For example, I think the main use case they're intended for are Shadow DOM, where you have custom elements, or maybe just Shadow DOM without custom elements, because you can do this. And then you import some style sheet. It does not apply any styles from anything that is nested inside a sheet, But you can say, okay, for this custom element, for this shadow DOM, shadow root, I want to apply this sheet from this. I guess it's just this sheet because you define it with some ident, and then you say, oh yeah, I want to use this sheet here. So it allows you to define in a single style sheet multiple chunks of code that are not applied anywhere, but you can selectively apply them in different places. I think it's a good proposal. I think in general, this is like one of the small moving blocks that kind of appear in CSS, and in the future we will be able to maybe use it more, maybe use it without Shadow DOM, just apply it to some light DOM. We'll see, but it basically allows browsers to, I guess, cache some groups of properties, rules in some way, but not apply it right away, and then selectively apply it. So in the future it will be pretty useful. Mostly for right now, I guess it will be mostly used as like build target. You bundle all your styles, you then wrap every part with add sheet, and then when you need to apply some styles, you just say, okay, for this page, for example, if you're in a SPA context, I say, okay, I apply this sheet, this sheet, this sheet, and you apply only them and not any others. And then you, if you want, you can just switch them up. You can do something like this right now, but only if you either use some scoping, like on the class name basis or some other mechanism, or you dynamically add or remove style sheets. So this allows you to kind of just bundle everything in one style sheet if you need, just one request, and then work with it.
Cool. Interesting. Do we want to talk more about any function or mixin stuff, or do we want to turn towards the CSS Working Group meeting, or else whatever else is new? I'd love to go through some of Roma's blog posts to like just get a tour of one of the experiments you're doing lately.
That works for me. Unless you had anything you wanted to show still on functions, Roma.
No, I don't think so. I have maybe I can show some of my not very recent but like latest articles about style sheets, functions. Let me see. So if so, I guess there were like one very simple one was on my blog, like the latest one from June. I guess it is about capturing, which is kind of concept where you can define some value for a custom property. For example, when you define custom property with value 1 EM, CSS just stores it as a string of tokens, so just 1 EM. It does not know about the actual font size on an element where you define this custom property. So if you use it later somewhere in the nested element, it will use the 1 EM from this element. Right now, you can kind of work around this if you want to get actual value from the element where you define custom property by registering it. So you can register like add property foo. Here is an example where we have register font size. We put some value here, and then on a nested element, we can get this value. So for example, you can define some value, override it, and then get the parent's font size and reapply it, or reapply it in some way. This is pretty cumbersome if you want to use it many times. I have an article where you can kind of get away with a few registered custom properties if you only use it once on an element. But a neat thing about functions is that it allows you to define a type, and it actually works as a registered custom property. When you pass a value here, it will right away expand it to its actual value. So when you do it here by using a custom function, it will just, result is a value, but it's a value of length. So it will calculate, on this element, what is the value of this value, and it will store it. So as you see in Chrome Canary, it also works. And you can do it in different ways by defining the type for the argument, or you can instead define the type of the return. And that's basically it. With this, there's like interesting thing that you can do is kind of work around of light dark. thing where light dark function in CSS, it only is possible to use inside anything that accepts colors. So you can use it for the color or background color, but you cannot use it for filter or something else. In this case, you can hack around and do a custom light dark function, which uses inline conditions with style, where we capture the color, compare if it is like use light dark value for capturing, and then like basically a lot of hacks around, but then it allows you to use it for anything, not just for colors, but also for like solid or dashed for display. And then, yeah, it just works. So one thing that very nice about functions and mixins is that this is kind of very complicated code. If you like this, you can come up with very different techniques to achieving some things, but CSS is like declarative. More complex stuff is not as easy to do. But by functions, you can just isolate it into a function. And then when you use it, you don't need to think about, okay, what are the implementation details? It will just work. So this is like the best thing about functions and mixins is that even though they, in theory, do not really provide that many functions and possibilities by themselves, they will allow you to reuse a lot of code that previously was very hard to reuse. You can do a lot of calculations, isolate it into some function, maybe as an npm package, then import it, and then, yeah, you just use some simple API. You don't need to think about, okay, how do I need to do it so it does not break? Yeah, it just allows you to do a lot of stuff like that.
Yeah, I like that. And there's sort of there's a progressive, I guess it's not progressive enhancement exactly, but an ability to, in one place, update and say, okay, CSS now supports some new feature that makes it simpler to do this same thing. And we can just update that in one place, and that change will apply everywhere. But yeah, it's interesting you're talking about the capturing, because it's sort of the opposite of what I was saying. But it's sort of custom properties by default. You inherit the token, which isn't typed unless you've registered it. And so there's workarounds where you can register it to get the exact value if you wanted. And there's not really workarounds to do the thing I was talking about, where you want to maintain the relationship. But yeah, this sort of lets you go either way. You can type the thing and get the actual, so an M converts to pixels and you get the actual pixels, or you can say maintain the relationship and get that, so you have a little bit more control there. That's really neat.
Yeah, I guess there's like one limitation is with color. It will capture any like literal color, but it will not capture the current color because it is expanded at like in the timing very late. So it's very interesting that in specs, if you look at any color functions like relative color syntax or color mix, they all have this exception about current color, and I think some other like built-in things where they do not expand. So if you will read the like value of some color, you will get the full thing with current color inside instead of the actual colors that you are getting on the element. So this kind of limitation, you cannot check if this current color is one or another, but you can still do a lot of interesting things with it. And yeah, speaking of like some other my articles related to this, I guess like before all of that, before conditions and mixins, there was like one way to kind of maybe it's not this one, yeah, this one, to do this thing where you want to apply some styles conditionally, but not apply them in any other way, and only apply them if you define some custom property. Because usually if you do some conditions with CSS without the new specs, you don't actually get a way to define some property only if some condition happens. Because you define this property, for example, display, it will just apply always. You don't really have a way to revert it unless you're using custom cascade layers and revert layer rule. in which case it will do this. So I have like this article. I will not go through it because it's a bit long. And also it builds upon maybe 3 or 4 other articles of similar length. But it allows you to define kind of mixin where you here say, okay, input something, and then if it is something, we apply something else. This is syntax that is currently not working. So I did not update this article's text, but I did update its content, because it's a very curious case where, okay, I wrote this article, but then later this is not working anymore. I actually have a separate blog post about this specific thing. Future-proofing indirect cyclic conditions, which talks about this thing where we resolved in CSS Working Group to break the technique that I invented, because it basically only was used by me. It's relied on some very obscure way custom properties work, where when you define the fallback for custom property, if it is another custom property, it participates in the cyclic dependency tree of your custom property. And in my article, I depend on this to basically do some conditions. And with the addition of the if function in CSS, there was some work to actually backport some of the new things that we came up with this to the just var function, to make its fallback kind of lazily evaluated and not create cycles by default. So because of that, Anders from Chrome did make, I guess, research, looked at use counter for custom properties, found that basically only my article really uses this thing, and decided, yeah, we can safely break it. So in this article, I say how we can kind of do very hacky things to continue using this pattern. So like this code, we work both in browsers that don't support if, but also in browsers that support if. But it's very hacky. But in theory, it might be possible to maybe transpile some of the custom functions, maybe some of the mixins to actual CSS right now. But I won't recommend it because there are a bunch of different cross-browser issues. There was, I think, some Firefox issues. There is over a Safari issue. So like when you try to do very fancy things like this, you usually encounter some cross-browser issues. So you need to report them, and then that means that even if they will be fixed, this technique could not be applied like always.
That's fun.
Yeah, and sort of what you're doing there is inventing the if ability to do if, and now we're going to have the actual if function. And I think that's useful for thinking about mixins and functions too, is that a lot of the power that we get from them is actually in the if function itself, but then being able to wrap up more logic around that if function and do a lot more with it. I think a lot of my function and mixin demos are based around adding power to an if.
Yeah, if will be very nice. Main thing is because it is evaluated on the same element. So if you want, like with style container queries, you cannot check things on the same element. With if function, you can check and do things based on the values of other custom properties on the same element. I hope we will get some block level version of it, because like in theory, you can just use it for every declaration. And we have a resolution to add the thing that is called revert rule, I think, which will revert the rule where you use it, revert the value for the rule where you're using it, similar to revert layer, reverting your declaration inside your layer. If it will be implemented, which some browser engineers say might be very complicated because it might impact the performance, we will be able to do block level if, but for now, just regular if is already pretty good. So this is kind of both So in this case, this is the if I guess workaround, but with add layer. I don't know if I mentioned it somewhere in this article. Yeah, with add layer and revert layer, you can use this pattern. You could use this pattern before it was broken to conditionally just say, okay, in this case, I just remove this background or whatsoever. It's as if it was not applied anywhere. So this is why it's kind of workaround for mixins. And I think I have, do I have? Yeah, the small grid by Stephanie Eccles. So this is, you say, okay, small grid. I can maybe inspect this just to show that, yeah, it just works. So you can say, yeah, small grid, 15 characters. Maybe I could zoom a bit. Yeah. And then you can kind of control, yeah, should it be applied? If you don't set this custom property, it's not applied at all. And you basically have a mixin which you apply just by assigning custom property. And I need to mention it to give credit where it's due. Like this really is a conclusion of many works of many different people. Like the whole thing, okay, if a custom property is defined, what we can do with it is a question that Hayden Pickering asked in Mastodon, where they were wondering how they could do, from what I understand, their, I guess, mixin for displaying errors in CSS, where I think there is an article by Hayden where, yeah, you can kind of validate your CSS, your HTML through CSS and display things. And then it's also based on a lot of different things like space toggles by Jane Ory and many different people who discovered it at some point. So yeah, there's a lot of work, I guess, went into it. And I hope that like my articles trying to break things and actually make it work made it so that, yeah, the actual conditions and mixins are now closer in the browsers than if they were before.
That's great. We'll find the Mastodon post and hopefully add it to this show notes.
Should be mentioned. I don't know if this article, yeah. I usually mention all the
excellent
things. So yeah, here is the history of this and all the past attempts. So it's like 1, 2, at least 2 articles, maybe more.
So well documented.
Yeah.
I love it. All of this reminds me that CSS is not a programming language, which I assume is said maybe in jest at this point. I don't know. Any comments?
It is and always has been.
Nice. That's such a good answer.
Yep. But also, we use words to mean whatever we want. So it is not a programming language if you don't want it to be. It is if you want it to be. It doesn't matter. We're just using words.
All right. I'm going to remove this unless there's more that we want to show. Let's talk about the CSS Working Group meeting. Let's talk about what else is new and upcoming in CSS if we want to dedicate a little bit of time. From what I understand, I wasn't there. Heard there's some discussion about masonry, perhaps.
Yeah.
Where are we with that?
Well, let's see. I mean, I was only there for part of it because these were like all-day meetings in Paris, and I was not in Paris. So the meeting started at 1 a.m. for me and ended at 9 a.m. So I only made it to parts of things. We finished all the scope issues, which is great. Scope is going to be shipping soon everywhere. We talked a lot about mixins on one of the days, solved a lot of problems there. But yeah, masonry was one of the big topics, and Roma might be able to speak to more of the discussion. The main thing that I saw come out of that was an answer to the question, how do you get masonry? Is it just a part of display grid, or is it its own display? And the answer is masonry is its own display type, but not called masonry. And we don't yet know what it's called. So
yeah, so it is a new display value, but the condition is that it should contain grid in its name to kind of show that, okay, it is still a grid. So it's kind of, I guess, in some way, both proposals combined, because we keep all the grid properties to work with it. We don't need to introduce a new set of properties just to work with this new Masonry layout. We reuse all the grid template things and everything else. And also, all the things about item flow are there, except for the mechanism of enabling this Masonry layout. So this is, like, I guess, why we were able to come up with this consensus, I guess, where we try to tackle all the issues that were not around the naming, try to unify all the layout mechanisms that we have with flags, with grid, and with the masonry, and then see, okay, what is the missing part? And I guess the last remaining part that was there is to, okay, how do we want to actually toggle this? I'm not sure what is the best way. I'm happy that we came up with the consensus. And I think that kind of makes sense that, okay, display grid stack or stack grid or something grid kind of makes sense with all the other item properties, grid properties. I think the fallback story, or like conditionally applying masonry or grid, becomes much more simple than with the initial display masonry proposal, where you had to redefine all the set of different properties that control it. Right now, it will be just mostly a question of toggling display property, which sounds good, and I guess how you could expect it to work. So yeah, I'm happy that we finally got this resolution.
Yeah, and the item flow stuff that you mentioned is something that people wouldn't likely have any experience with, except for maybe reading some of the WebKit blog posts about it. But it came out of this discussion. The W3C technical architecture group, who sort of reviews every spec and says, can this be improved? They're sort of the code review for specifications. They looked at the masonry proposal and they said, not only do we have concerns with the masonry proposals as they exist, but we have concerns that different layout modes are already too different. There's already too much separate between grid and flex and block layout. And can we provide some tools that unify this? And so item flow comes out of that. It's some unified item properties that would apply across different layout methods, and they sort of build on existing properties, reuse existing properties to become shorthands for them, I think. I don't know all the details there, but I think it's interesting. There's been a real move that came out of the masonry proposals to try and unify all CSS layouts and make them all more consistent. And that's really exciting to me.
Yeah, I think some of it is also applying to multi-column model, which I'm really hoping that will get more traction. I think some browser engines need to do a bit more work for it to be like viable. For example, from what I understand, in WebKit, it is not easy to implement like a lot of stuff on top of the multi-column right now, because it's very old implementation. Chrome did rewrite their layout engine fully, and so they unlocked like a lot of fragmentation things that need to be there for multi-column module to work properly. But I think WebKit is slowly going there, and we will be able at some point to do this. And yeah, multi-column modules, I guess, the only thing is that it is not enabled by display property. It's enabled by the very different set of things, but it still will share a bunch of stuff. For example, like gap decorations, gap itself, some other stuff. So yeah.
Before we move on, thought I would just bring up some of the comments here. Is it just me, or do the current masonry implementation in Chrome go kaboom whenever one adds row? And then there's an example here. Masonry direction row. Any experience with that? Anyone?
I don't actually know. I haven't played a lot with the. I think both Chrome. I think all the browsers have different implementations currently, and
Yeah,
so
I think
it doesn't surprise me if they all go kaboom in various ways.
Yeah, I think Firefox implemented the current like Masonry long time ago and first as display Masonry, I think.
Mhm.
Then WebKit implemented it only, I think, under like feature flags. Then WebKit came up with I don't remember actually the timeline, but yeah, WebKit came up with a proposal using not display property, but Chrome wanted it to be display property, but with also a set of other properties. And now, like recently, Chrome pushed like some prototype implementation in the canary with like some other Masonry stuff. But now that is decided to actually do it through display and grid something, I think, yeah, a lot of old prototype code will be rolled out, both in like Firefox and Safari and whatever is there in Chrome. I don't know if there will be like anything that works now should continue work in grid, but Masonry, yeah, could change in any way. Yeah.
All right. Well,
I saw-
leave a comment and let us know what you think that grid name should be for the old Masonry.
Yeah, we can also link to that issue where the discussion is happening if you want to weigh in. I also saw a comment about declarative versus imperative. And one of the interesting things that you'll find with mixins and functions is that they are declarative again in the sense of like the order of your properties doesn't matter, except that the last one takes precedence. So it's not like with a Sass function, if you define a variable in the function and then you use that variable and then you redefine it, the order of the code is going to matter in Sass, right? It's going to use the first definition for if you try to use it between the two definitions. And that's not how it's going to work in CSS. If you define a variable and then use it and then redefine it, the ordering doesn't matter in CSS because it is declarative. It's a bucket of properties. And so we resolve all those properties and then the relationships between them. And so it doesn't have control flows. It's not going to get loops in the same way. So there is still some real declarativeness to how these features that we think of as more imperative, they still work in a very declarative way.
Yeah, although I think there might be like some exceptions specifically for mixins and custom media queries, where for both of these, it was defined that they cannot be used, like they need to be defined before use, which I think will mean that, okay, you define mixin foo, you call it somewhere, but then if you again define another mixin foo and then use it, it will use the latest version, but the one before will use the one that was defined before. So because it is evaluated like at this earlier step, similar to custom media queries, it will be still a bit imperative. And I think it's maybe a bit like quite good in some ways. Like this will make it a bit more resilient, for example, for libraries use cases, where if you have a library, you have mixins, you use it inside of your library. Adding another competing library with similarly named mixins will not break anything. Like this is like one of the cases where this property is good. Although I think like in general in CSS, I think we need to find a way to handle this in a better way. But yeah, from what it was defined, resolved in the CSS Working Group meeting, mixins will probably work a bit more imperatively than a lot of other things in CSS. And how it will work with layers is not yet defined.
I think I had a note on that about mixins and how it interacts with layers. So that was one of the points that we already covered. Great. Was there some discussion about colors and gamut mapping?
Oh yeah, there was some progress. So right now, if you use wide gamut colors, color formats like OKLCH or OKLab, which are very useful for getting perceptually uniform colors. Like if you change the lightness an equal amount in HSL, you have a blue and you have a yellow, and you adjust their lightness to the same value, they're going to look very different lightnesses. And if you adjust them by the same amount, they're going to move different amounts of perceptual lightness. And that's because HSL is designed to get all of the colors that we can display into a perfect cylinder that we can move around using these 3 coordinate values to move around the cylinder and grab a color. So you can either get those clean edges to your gamut, in which case where like 100% lightness is always the edge, and 0% is always the center, and you have that very clean shape to move around in. But that means that you're not perceptually uniform. You're stretching some values and squishing some values. Or you can let everything take whatever shape it will and keep things perceptually uniform. And that's what OKLCH and OKLab do. But that means that you can easily say, well, 60% lightness in blue worked, so I want 60% lightness in yellow, and then, or the other way around. And the browser says, that's not actually a color we can display. So the browser has to do something to it to be able to display it. And currently, what they do is they convert to RGB, and then they clip any values that are any red, green, or blue values that are over 1 or below 0. And that can end up with colors changing quite a bit. You can end up with a totally different hue than you intended, because like all the reds got cut off. And so now your color is more blue than it should be, or whatever. There was a proposal in the CSS spec originally to gamut map, to say, for accessibility, for typography, for a lot of what we do with CSS, we want to keep the same hue because that's what people are perceiving the most, and like you care the most about for your brand or something, right? You don't want the blue changing to red or the red changing to blue. So we try to keep the hue, and we'll try to keep the lightness because that's going to matter for accessibility. And so we'll have this mapping logic that just changes how saturated, it just changes the chroma. That was the proposal, but browsers didn't like it for various reasons. So for a long time, we've had this clipping behavior that is not very good. There was finally an agreement on some different gamut mapping proposals that browsers did like. It's still a little vague and hand-wavy. There's still not an implementation, but we at least have agreement that browsers should fix this and that we have some ways they can fix it. So hopefully soon it will be a little safer using wide gamut colors. That's a long explanation of something that might happen.
Excellent. Thanks for that update. Off topic, but Rachel Andrews spoke about exceptions, which we mean exclusions here, in her CSS Day talk about multi-call. Is anything moving on that, S. David? Oh, I can't hear
you, Roma.
Yeah, I don't think so. There is anything happening. But yeah, first we will need to get the layout rewritten for multi-call and fragmentation in WebKit before, I guess, more changes could start happening. I think once that happens, I think we will get a lot of good stuff there for multi-call, because in Chrome we have Rachel Andrew, in Safari we have Jen Simmons. Both of them are very good with layouts, with doing, like, Jen have very great examples of various layout types that we want to do. Rachel wrote about multi-call and what we can and can't do a lot of as well. So I hope once WebKit is there will be a lot of progress here. However, I'm currently have a draft of an article of how we could do some types of exclusions with just what we have now, with floats. And it will be mostly useful for like the Chrome prototype of block level overflow for multi-call, because this is like the missing thing that I think we need for multi-call to be workable on the web in general, because you want things to overflow in block direction and not only in line direction, because it's just, yeah, for many users is not very convenient and useful. Once we will get it, yeah, it will be pretty nice. And yeah, I will try to finish up this article. I don't know when I will do this, but yeah.
Well, when you do, send us the link. We'll make sure to add it to the show notes and the description here. I think we are running out of time, but one more quick question. Do we know the status of contrast color function?
I don't remember. I think there was some simplified version of it that's starting to ship, where you only get black or white and you don't get to specify the algorithm used.
Yes, I think so. I think like there is, I guess, some waiting game for the proper algorithm to be either defined in VCAG or some other way where we could actually get a better result. But yeah, the main issue is that the current algorithm for contrasting VCAG results in not actually usable combinations of colors in some cases. So only using dark, like black and white colors allows you to at least get something that is better than if you provide a list of colors and then choose the most contrasting one when the algorithm is a bit flawed. So we are kind of waiting for a better algorithm to be there before we could expand this function to be more flexible.
And you might have seen another algorithm floating around that does better in some cases. It also has its issues. And right now, there's an added issue of like the current WCAG algorithm is actually required by law. So you can't switch to a different one just willy-nilly. We have to somehow make sure that we have one that's good and reliable and can actually replace the previous one in a legal sense. And so there's a lot more to work through with that.
Great. All right. I'm going to wrap up here. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Roma, thanks for coming on and being a fantastic guest. Is there anything you'd like to pitch?
Not really. I guess donate to Bird on Open Collective or GitHub.
All right. We will make sure to add that link there. Mia, you have a workshop coming up. Is there anything you can share with us about that?
Yeah, I'll be at Smashing Conference in the fall in New York, and I'll be giving a talk on what you need to understand about custom properties now in order to be ready for functions and mixins when they come. And then I'll be doing a full day workshop there as well, going into a lot of new features in CSS and even old features, but understanding them together, understanding how Flexbox and Grid work together, what they do differently, when to use which, that sort of thing. But also some of the new things like has and other features. So yeah, sign up for that workshop. I'd love to see some people there.
Excellent. Tickets are on sale already. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
We'll
over at the Smashing Conference website.
Excellent. Oddbird is available to work with you to create your custom web apps and design systems. If you liked any of the content on today's show, all the show notes, all the links, demos will be available at oddbird.dev/wingingit. Let us know what you want to hear from us in the future. For the next show, we don't have a topic selected yet. We have some ideas, but if you have anything you'd like to learn about, we'd be happy to take all of your input. If you want to support us, please like and subscribe. If you want more from Oddbird, we invite you to check out our newsletter at oddbird.dev/oddnews. And thank you. Remember, best practice is a conversation, so let's keep talking. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. See ya.
Good to see you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.